Drew, it's such a pleasure to have you here on the show. And I'm so excited to talk about this topic. I felt like we had a conversation of conversations even before we got started. And I cannot tell you how excited I am about your book, Healing the Modern Brain. And I would love to know what was the impetus, specifically, not just writing this book and the reason why you felt like, okay, this book needs to come out right now, but even in your work around healing the brain in this modern world.
Well, Mariza, thank you, first of all, so much for having me on to talk about the book. And just thanks for honoring mental health. So much of your platform is helping women understand, what's happening to their minds and their
Yeah.
brains during perimenopause and menopause. That's been a huge part of my practice. I think also my learning curve as a male physician of just trying to take better care of my patients, certainly working with lots of women in the perimenopause and menopause period. And it's just there's a lot going on. So to get back to your question though, my inspiration for writing the book came from a couple of different places. I think one, it came the personal spot, my own life of having been through a number of transitions, going from being a full-time Manhattan psychiatrist to being full-time telepsychiatrist, living with my parents in rural Indiana, to living in Wyoming, a state with lots and lots of wonderful beauty and also some known mental health challenges. And just wanting to be more clear, I think, in my own life, and then also as I was thinking structurally about my clinical work, what do we do in our everyday that's pretty guaranteed to help our mental health? Because there's so much in my physical fitness, like whether you're doing it or not, you have a goal, right? And if you don't have a goal, like a spot in your day where you're working on your body in some way or exercising, physical fitness, it's like, it's kind of a problem, right? It's always either you're doing great or you have a goal to do better because we know how important physical fitness is for our physical health. It just really struck me, kind of like nutritional psychiatry struck me, right? I'm sort of one of those doctors that was early in the push to say, hey, mental health, we need to consider food, ask about it at least in your eval, talk about it with your patients, think sensibly about it. So I thought the same thing kind of extended in these other areas, just things that we didn't have set up in our minds as like, this is really essential for my mental health. These are things that are tried and true. And now the cool thing, and I hope what people see in the book and gets motivating and exciting for them in the book is all of the cool new science about how stuff that we've always known is good for our mental health really impacts the brain structure, and brain function. So it's a little bit of where it came from. It's just like I needed more clarity. I turned 50 in terms of my own structure of mental health. And it just felt like, hey, I think we all need this right now. In the midst of so much polarization, so much, there's the mental health epidemic feels like it's coming for you in one form or another, not to be a fear monger. It's just was it 20% of our teens get depressed every year. I live in a community which about 40% of the adult population struggles with alcohol use disorder. So, mental health is all around us, and we're all in some ways really doing our best to bolster and improve, make sure that we have what it takes to help ourselves get through and our families get through, kind of whatever gets thrown at us.
Yeah, I mean, the stats are very clear that a lot of us are struggling, either with depression or anxiety, loneliness and isolation, and it just kind of puts us deeper in the hole. And particularly for my women, my community, where they're holding so much up and requiring so much mental bandwidth and mental agility, acrobatics, whatever you want to call it, the level of decision making that comes their way, and then kind of just getting hit with shifting hormones. It kind of just feels like, man, one thing stacks on top of another, and it kind of spirals a little bit out of control. And so, yeah, I mean, there's definitely one thing to consider, our mental, our physical fitness, and I think it ties into our mental fitness as well, particularly being in nature. I was thinking about Wyoming being so beautiful and being in nature. I'm curious if that's kind of one of the reasons why you had moved there, is to be more out in nature for the support of your mental health and your family's mental health. But I'm curious, yeah, what is it in living in this modern world, because there's so much that can't be changed. A lot of maybe our work schedule, the work demands, societal demands, all the little things that we're dealing with every single day, maybe some of those things cannot change. And yet in this book, I believe you really portray that there are minor shifts that we can make every single day that can really support our mental health and also our overall emotional resilience.
Yes, I definitely think there are things that we can do in our everyday. I'm not recommending that everybody move to Montana or Wyoming or the country and that solves everything. Lots and lots of mental health problems in the country. I do in the book try to give people some lenses that I look at these things through, and I think most modern clinicians look at them through. But I think what you're highlighting in the book is something I hope people hear and everybody listening hears loud and clear. Ladies, I appreciate that this needs to be practical. I'm a clinician. Probably want everybody to hear up front. If you're watching the video, the couch behind me, it's had people on it all day. It has folks on it right after this. And so I really tried to bring things that aren't extreme and that are evidence based and that are feasible. Because I'm the kind of doc where, for example, when I think about what I want you to do with food, I want to encourage you and celebrate all the success you're already having in the things that you're doing. And then I want to think about kind of easy ways that you can up level the nutrient density of your meals to get more of what your brain needs, just as an example. So the small steps you're talking about, yes, I very much believe in that. Happened to me just yesterday. I was recording another interview. I was really schlumpy. I hadn't had any protein. I'll admit it. I had like some fruit leathers. I was just like, oh,
Oh,
got up and I
goodness.
started
Your poor
doing my,
brain.
oh, I was like, but it's like my poor brain also, hey, I know I've got a month of calories. I know as long as I have a hydration, I can pretty much do anything. I'm trained for this. I'm made for this. I got up, I did my shakes, I did my get going, I got my energy up. I had a great interview. 3 minutes, kind of my shaking,
Yeah.
dancing, bouncing, energizing movement is what I think about that as very intentional. And so I do love this notion that, not that we're going to be burdened, that you've got your like 9 tenet of mental fitness, checklist that you're carrying with you everywhere, like a little bingo card. Like, I don't want mental fitness in any way to be oppressive. My idea is that it's inspirational because it feels good. That we all know we start moving our bodies more. What's the top movement recommendation for mental health? Hey, everyone's like, oh, 150 minutes of
150
aerobic
minutes.
exercise. I think you should go dancing tonight. Or just right after this podcast, or even right now as you're listening, you should throw on little tunes and be dancing as you're listening along. Why? Dancing has the largest effect size of movement when it comes to improving our mood and treating depression. And so I love all the exercise. I think it's great. It's just for some people that language doesn't work, or that hasn't worked for motivating them, or they don't feel comfortable in a gym or lifting weights. Okay. Like, there's a lot that you can do in terms of how you move your body to change your brain, improve your mental health. And so those are the type of, again, like small recommendations that I'm hoping people will see. And then backing that up with some of the brain science that just, it's compelling and I think motivating.
I love that you did what I call an exercise snack right before the interview, where just, 1 to 3 minutes, just moving, whether that's shaking, that's very deliberate. I like to more like jack squats or jumping jacks or something, just, going up and down stairs, just moving and just getting that energy flowing, dancing even better still.
I
But
like
yeah,
to I like the vocalizing where you get like the resonance, just really kind of getting it out. I just think it's underutilized. Like, I meet a lot of people and they haven't sung a song for a while. They haven't sung with people for a long time. It's like, why am I into singing? It's like, well, I think it does something for us.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
if
and you're talking specifically like kind of stimulating the vagus nerve in that way, or just moving
I think
out
there's some
energy,
vagal
or
I think there's some
or
vagal
all of
nerve
it.
stimulation. I
Yeah.
think there's certainly I think
Definitely with that noise.
I think the way I think about it is my nervous system response,
Yeah.
and that everybody is a little different. I'm not suggesting everybody go home and start like growling and purring and singing, but I think if that floats your boat and does something for your nervous system, it does something for mine, and it helps you. It helps you kind of switch. It helps you deal with stress and anxiety. Then, bam, that's a tool. And again, free, easy tool, humming, growling, singing, something everyone has access to. So I think these are the examples of some of the ideas in healing the modern brain where the tenets are things, again, we agree on. And, if it's not a perfect fit, there are a lot of different ways that you can incorporate things that again help you have like a better regulated nervous system, and then better able to deal with whatever is coming your way mental health wise.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. And I was thinking about the statement of the 150 minutes. It's in my book, by the way, like
It's
that I
everybody's
just
book. That's the
finished. It's everybody's
recommendation.
book, right? Well, and and then how do we break that down, and how do you make it more like it doesn't have to be that. How do you make it more manageable? And I think about the everyday person. Are we talking about my audience, the everyday woman who's got stack on stack on stack? She's got the first job and then she's got the night job. You know, if you're any of you are parents that are listening, you know, you got the nighttime routine,
It
you got all
doesn't
the things.
stop,
It
right?
doesn't, and
There's
I always
not
say
like
it's
free time.
constant. No, there's no free
Yeah.
time. And so like how do you get it in, you know, and how do you preserve
Mm.
your emotional well-being, your mental health, one that you can hold space for the little people that you're taking care of in your life as well, not only just yourself. And so, you know, for me, it's always the little things that I'm stacking across the day, you know, especially, you know, if you're coming as I think about so many people who come into, let's just say even midlife with, you know, traumas and, you know, an ACE score of over a 3 and all of it just kind of comes up for review at some point. And so like how do you manage some of that on the day to day. Like for me as an example, I'm a very hyper vigilant person. You know, type A.
Mm.
I had a lot of trauma as a child, and so I know that I can tip the scale on my stress response system very quickly. That my nervous system actually, in its own way of unfortunate development, really kind of is a bit high functioning. It not doesn't serve me over time. I have autoimmune conditions and all kinds of things that have manifested on a physical level due to this level of high level performance. And so for me, every day I build in all of this intentional kind of self-care and movement and nature so that I can keep that what I call my deepest strongest patterning from playing out.
Mm.
And so I was curious when we're talking about, mental resilience and mental health, or even supporting our stress response system. Obviously, there are some big pivots that we can make and seeing clinicians. But yeah, I'm always thinking about, well, what can I do in the interim when I'm feeling my system start to deregulate? When I start to feel like I'm losing my ability to have good stress tolerance. And how can I, get in front of it before it kind of gets away from me?
It's a great question, and it's one I spend a lot of time with patients sitting hearing about when people get activated. Some people call it triggered. Some
Mm-hmm.
people just, as you notice, as you're saying, you have a deeper pattern that you have a lot of self-care going on, but sometimes that doesn't do it.
Yeah,
And
no, I
so
know. Yeah.
the self-awareness is the first tenet
Mm-hmm.
of mental fitness, to start and see some of the patterns that are going on, right? If there are certain ideas or thoughts, or a lot of times I see that things that are going on in people's lives they know about are activating or triggering for them. And we're just kind of in a model mostly of suppression. I'm not going to
Yeah.
let my trauma overwhelm my present. So I would say that there are a couple of things in what you shared. And thanks, by the way, for sharing that. I think it's helpful and real. And a lot of us are struggling or have had a variety of different traumas in our development, and they come up in very what I find frustrating and annoying about trauma is how for me it comes up in like unexpected places.
Inconvenient.
Yeah, or like the other day, like I went to the bank to sign some, simple bank documents, everything's done, and I just got all these like creepy feelings of financial insecurity from when I was a kid, just like weird how it seeps in. You're mentioning the tenet of self-awareness, right? Which is one, having the self-awareness of like I am getting triggered. Some people have that, some people don't. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you can't kind of catch it, be aware of it, man, you can't really manage it. You can't have tools about it. The way I try to think about it is you can't be kind to yourself. It's
Yeah.
like I find a lot of people are much more kind to like their pets than they are to themselves, right? If your
Yeah.
pet were like whimpering a little bit or like scared of something, you'd be like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, what do you see over there?" Right? You'd have the sensitivity that I think oftentimes we lack with ourselves. I think another thing you mentioned, I think about it a little bit like exposure and training the nervous system. That really working on getting into those more deeply relaxed states. That if you're a hypervigilant person, or you're a person where you're really ambitious and pushing, that works for a variety of things in life. But eventually, for some of the larger goals of settling down, settling with ourselves, that type of ambition sometimes can be obfuscating, can make it just not as clear to us what we're about, because we're so busy attending to deadlines and things. And for women in your audience, I think being of service, kind of
Mm-hmm.
ending up in this, you're
Indispensable is what I like to call it.
very
Being
and
indispensable.
I call it the matriarch. Right? It's
Yeah.
just this matriarchal power of your a lot of care, a lot of service, and then often being in the middle, kind of holding up aging parents with, everyone says different details to their situations, but just from the facing mortality to the dealing with stubbornness to just the sad, surreal thing of time passing, and then caring often for kids, and then caring for partner, and
Mm.
if that's like a man in andropause these days, that can be, that's got some, I would say, stereotypes, challenges to it that of what men are going through in their late 40s, early 50s that, just again, there are specific strategies, I think, but it's a lot of management, right? And it's a lot of people depending on you, as you said, indispensable. And so, as you said, like kind of where to start, I think, is not being overwhelmed. As you kind of map out, you have a good daily mental fitness strategy. There's also a tenet in the book, and it was hard to kind of squeeze into a chapter, but I felt it was really important to put in. And it was about unburdening. And I share the story of
Mm.
one of my patients, and the book really revolves around patient stories, evidence, some stories from my life. I share much more about myself in this book than I ever have before. If you're interested in, andropause aged men, so inner world, it's in there. So, talking about unburdening, in all seriousness, not to
Yeah,
joke,
no, I think this, I'm
humor is
excited.
the healthiest defense, they tell us. But
I agree.
to think about unburdening is there are things we all need to process and work through. There are things we're carrying with us, and they call it baggage for a reason. It's kind of like annoying, clumsy, like awkward. You get tired carrying it. And so, trying to understand what is on your agenda in terms of if past trauma is burdening you, how can you take steps towards being more unburdened? A classic thing I'll see is where people have had bad relationship experiences. Just had some bad dates. Maybe somebody was mean on a Tinder date, got stood up a few too many times. And modern dating is tough, as everyone listening knows.
Modern everything is tough.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it's called, healing the modern brain. It was for a reason, which is I
yeah,
feel
I
the
mean, I
modern
feel like that's
world.
the general tenet of the
Yeah, it's
book of
just,
like modern life is happening, and how can we feel unburdened? So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, in it.
Yeah, and this idea that we need to do more now,
y-
right? That
uh,
that it's there's more we're involved with and aware of emotionally. And so, I appreciate trauma is very complex. I appreciate there are a lot of competing schools on how the best way for you to deal with your trauma. I tried in a very simple and straightforward way to honor that trauma exists, and that for many folks a barrier to mental fitness is not having processed or worked through some of how your trauma is deregulating or even derailing your daily life. If you've had relational trauma and you have what I call a lot of relational potential, right? That you have a lot to give in relationships, take a lot of pleasure in relationships. Sorting through what has happened in the past, so you can move really confidently into the future and be present. In this example, re-engage with relationships for the pleasures it gives you. That you could, I think everybody listening can see, it's just being a fundamental step. If you're a therapist in my shoes, where you're sort of helping people reestablish their life, often the unburdening is just a really vital step. There are a lot of things that people have never said. A couple tips in this. I think oftentimes people need to be a bit more selective on who they share with. I think some burdens that we have can be sorted out on our own. I think there's an idea of, got to share everything. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm big into sharing. Obviously, talk about the feelings, give them words. I've also in my own life found that, some of my stuff I've worked out in a journal a little bit more. I've had lots of therapy sessions about it too. Just it's kind of, I don't know, giving me something a little different. I've gone to workshops and intensive weekends. I really like that for some stuff. I don't like it for others. But that said, there's like more than ever before in terms of working through some of what has been challenging. And then in the book, I also encourage people, I'm not just talking violent trauma. I'm not going to talk trauma. It's like violence, robbery, rape, sexual assault. I mean, these are all horrible traumas.
yeah, the big ones.
Yeah, well, they call them the big ones.
But,
It's like, I don't know.
but I
I
think
think it's like those are specific ones
those
for
are real
sure.
big.
Those are big. They stick with you in certain ways. But having sat with people who have trauma where it's confusing, like why am I so dysregulated about this thing my mom did or didn't do, and it wasn't something violent or sexual. I just like to honor like sometimes really like what seems benign to other people, but really like small things stick with folks. And I think probably my biggest hope of the unburdening is when there are those things that are really tripping people up, that some attention can be paid to them to see if, again, something can get loosened or moved through, or as I say in this clinic, transcended. The goal of our work in mental health is to move past or through something, right? To be beyond it, to transcend it. Not that all of symptoms always go away, but there's a difference between having symptoms and knowing, for example, you have depression or bipolar disorder or PTSD, and they're happening for certain reasons in certain contexts. You have a set of tools to handle them. That's a much different way of being in the world.
Yeah, I love the idea of unburdening and awareness. For all the trauma work I've done and the different types of modalities and therapies, and I mean all the things. Like sometimes it just wants to come up for review again. And so in situations kind of like you described when you went to the bank, and all of a sudden these insecurities, you're like, why is this coming up right now? Like and so I'll find that where things will just want to come up for review to be, I guess, maybe to be processed again, or maybe to just show me that I'm doing the most right now. Like maybe I need to take a step back.
I feel like in the examples you're giving, it's showing that you have tools, and I think it's also a difference in stance. Some
Mm.
people think about approaching mental health as, you're going to obliterate your symptoms. You come in, you go into remission, like you
Yeah,
deal with the
I'm so
trauma.
glad you're cleaning this up because I
Well,
just want people to know it doesn't go. I haven't found, despite a lot of the work, the deeper work, that you're cured. You know what I'm saying? Like that your life is a continuum.
I think so. I mean, I think there are certain symptoms that certainly get cured or get better. I think with things like complex trauma, there's a mix of having it kind of run your life at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
To then trying to dissociate from it and not have it be
Mm.
involved with your life, to then having it come up at times. So I think it's important for people to, again, distinguish the difference between you're maybe not going to have some symptoms, or you're going to have better tools, or you'll be more oriented versus like obliterating who you are. I
Yeah.
think I see this also because I work with a lot of individuals who have chronic illnesses. So if you have
Mm-hmm.
ADHD, it's not like that, one day you wake up and it's like, wow, now I focus great. Like,
Right.
so there's, I would say, the reality of understanding the self, where we start with self-awareness is, again, that notion of, before we think about how to play these cards, do you know what they are? Like, are you
Yeah.
being real? Are you being real? Like, it takes us all a while. It took me a while to just be really clear of, some cards a little better than others in my hand.
Well,
And
yeah, taking ADHD, for example, I have family members with ADHD that where they have a lot of tools in the toolbox, and sometimes life kind of gets them up, it gets above water, and the tools kind of fall to the wayside, but then they kind of recalibrate and leverage just the tools come back into play. And then all of a sudden, so there's like this ebb and this flow of, the more that we're able to utilize the tools, then things kind of flesh themselves out, and you kind of, maybe you feel, I don't, there's no defining normal, but maybe you feel like, okay, I'm in a flow. And then kind of life may hit, and then it all kind of just falls apart. And so for example, this week I had a lot of plans for work things I was very excited about. I'm working on a TED talk myself. I know you've been a TED speaker, and my son got very, very sick. And to the point where I was on the couch with him for 10 hours a couple days ago. And that
mm,
was definitely not what my day was supposed to look like. And but I even had my nanny sitting next to me for 2 hours, maybe hoping that he'd want to hang out with her, but he had no desire. And I just had to honor that and surrender. But my nervous system was really struggling with it because it wasn't there was
right.
no productivity for a day that I was really excited to be productive. And so yeah, I felt like a lot of my tools went out the door on that day
Kind of
specifically.
shows the orientation. I think so many women in your kind of situation are struggling with it. You're saying there's like no productivity.
I know.
And it
Or
feels
I
like
get a lot from
you
my
haven't spent
women.
a lot of time with men who got sick and their moms were gone, or got sick and their moms were drunk, or
Mm.
just got sick and their moms didn't take the day off from work. And I don't mean to guilt or shame any moms who this isn't how do I put it?
No, I
It's
understand.
it's fine to
Yeah.
leave kids at home when they're sick. I'm just saying that it's interesting to get frames that's not productive. And
Yeah, that's what I was grappling with. I knew that I chose the thing that was the right, that my heart taking care of my son literally being on the couch with him as he slept or as he, just needed, he needed mama all day. He was like a little succubus. He was just on me. He was like a little monkey leech, like I couldn't go anywhere. Like I couldn't go to the bathroom without my son. Like he needed to be cared. So it was, it was one of those days. But yeah, I definitely felt like all the tools that I had kind of fluttered out the window. I was really grappling with it. I knew I was doing the right thing, but I also was really bummed about how my day had turned out.
Well, I think you're also speaking of something that's confusing where so often and in the book, I really encourage this of, kind of using our feelings as a compass. I also
Mm-hmm.
try and point out there are times when, things don't feel great. And
Yeah,
even
it
though you're
didn't feel
making the
great.
right choice, it's like, it's sort of, and it's a little confusing, right? If you're
Yes.
making the right choice, you'd feel good about it. And I think it's where, it's where I find, again, some of these self-awareness tools of journaling helpful. I'm a big advocate of therapy, not just for symptom controlling because you're struggling with mental health, but for mental fitness, for this notion of an ongoing kind of maintenance and attention to the mind, your mental health, your specific goals in terms of your attachments. You were asking earlier, I just wanted to get back to this notion of, does it get better? And I think there's a way, as a psychiatrist, I'm very focused on functioning. If you look at all of kind of mental health and psychiatric disorders, all of the DSM, kind of our Bible of
Mhm.
psychiatry, they list a bunch of symptoms and you have to have so many. And then it kind of gets down to the end where it says like, and these symptoms have to cause an interruption in functioning.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to really struggle and see that it's interrupting work or relationship functioning. Now, that's not always the case. And part of where healing the modern brain tries to kind of open things up a little bit is to move away from this notion. Everybody's getting all, I don't know, uptight, concerned, worried, scrutinizing, like, why are diagnoses going up so much? And it's a great question. I mean, and I think there's some kind of clear answers to that. And the book tries to get into that. When we look at teenage depression going from 8% to 20% of our teens over the past 2 decades, there's some real clear things that increase the risk of depression that have also happened. Most kids are eating almost entirely ultra processed foods. Is that the root cause of all mental health? No. Is that
It's a
contributing to the
player.
burden? Yeah, it's contributing for sure. That's not just fringy wellness folks anymore. That's pretty
That's pretty clear.
clear.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear evident. We have a sedentary lifestyle. We have screens and smartphones. And so there's a number of environmental contributors to the rise in mental health conditions we're seeing. That question of like, does it get better? I really try to think of functioning and then really to think about it as a win. And if you're feeling that your tools and the development that that to me sounds like a situation where people are really, kind of again, operating a mental fitness plan and it's working for them.
Okay. Okay. I like that idea. Yes. And I think, you go talking about the being hard on oneself. You're kinder, hopefully kinder to your children and your dogs. And you are, you see that play out where, you're hard on yourself, but you know how to be kind. You know how to be kind, but you're kind of just beating yourself up and, having mental fitness, and integrating these things kind of opens the door for us to be a bit more kinder to our bodies and our ourselves. Like we're nourishing ourselves, or we're caring for ourselves in a way. Because
Yeah,
yeah,
I think so because I mean, I'm supposed to be an expert in this, and my wife had to take me to didn't had to take me. She scheduled a yoga class the other night at 7.
you
And I
got to
remember,
go.
yeah, and I remember I
Yes,
said
in the
yes,
middle
and
of
I have to be,
dinner, by the
I
way.
was like annoyed. I was kind of annoyed. I don't know. We ate dinner early actually, so we
Yeah,
could digest our lentils, and we
I
went,
love that.
and it wasn't even, as you said, for that, I don't think that it wasn't a good class for her. For me, I got in there, I was like, I couldn't believe I got some time to just stretch. I like started crying a little bit. I have to say, I don't know, it's like andropause moment or what. Just like it's a lot going on. I've kind of been in
You're
front
in
of
the
the
middle of a
camera all
book
day,
launch. Yeah.
middle of the book, just like, oh, I felt it just kind of released a little bit, stretched a little bit. What I find is amazing how in just this like 45 minutes an hour, like where your mind can go, as your body's relaxing, as you're leaning into some of those more challenging kind of stretches. So yeah, I don't know how you've got me on to
Yeah.
talking
No,
about
well,
crying in you.
I love that you guys went, at 7 in prime, dinner time. You guys did dinner early, but like more bedtime. And I know you have older children, so works. But I love that was like, here we go, 7 o'clock. We're doing this. Yeah, that you really tended to yourself, or you kind of in a
Well, I think
way.
this is around like how do we be kinder? And I think probably
Yeah.
one of my tips is, take it when it's offered.
Yeah. I
Because
love
there is a
that.
way that saying yes, and the other is creating structure. For me with launch and a practice, like my life is really in the phone, and so I have to very actively find things. One of the reasons you'll see me like riding horses and going out on my split board is you can't be on your phone, and
Yeah, you cannot.
it's where I like the mountain biking. It's like both hands on the handlebars.
Yeah.
So again, whatever you need to do to kind of create that structure, create that space to get away from the phone, I think is very important. And then on the subject again of just being kind to the self, mental fitness is really about that. It's saying, you have incredible potential. Some of it's not being appreciated or achieved because the modern world is going to really erode your mental fitness unless you have a more clear structure. And so, this is what I have identified the people I've worked with over the years. They're just kind of, I don't know, just like lights up the room. And so in a lot of ways, I don't think people will be surprised. I think some of the neuroscience will surprise people, when you see some of this idea that like regular journaling strengthens and kind of increases the activity of the prefrontal cortex. That's kind of the reasoning, like decision-making, executive function part of our brain. And so that, this notion that sitting with yourself in the morning with a cup of tea and cup of coffee in my case, and putting a page down and seeing what evolves in your writing as you do that, that actually changes brain function over time. You get like stronger abilities in the part of your brain, or more kind of activity in the part of your brain that does decision making stuff. I found that really cool. I found it compelling. I found like I went from thinking my journaling it was a little, I don't know, not being so kind to myself, a little self disparaging, like middle-aged man who's journaling, like, oh yeah, this is really helping me. Because it is. It's like, this is feeling really good. I think I'm getting somewhere. I like looking through this. It's helping me put words to things. It's helping me kind of confront some of my fears in a different way.
Hmm.
And so, I think the neuroscience helps back that up too,
Yeah.
of
Oh,
like, and
absolutely.
my
Yeah.
brain's growing.
I love that. And when you're journaling, because I know the ladies like to get into the details of of what we're looking at there. Is this free flow for you, or do you have prompts that you like to go by? And do you have? I know I'm assuming you talk a lot about journaling in the book as well as an option to kind of help just process. Are you offering prompts in the book as well?
There are prompts in the book, and some
Yeah,
of
I
them
love it.
are, simple prompts, right? I'm a psychiatrist, so I'm interested in your struggles, your fears, your challenges, what's bothering you. I mean, for me, I would say it's pretty free flow at this point. If I like to sit down and I run my journal like I run my psychotherapy room. In my psychotherapy room, I really want to hear what's on your mind. I had this happen today. One of my patients like, all right, therapist choice. What do you want to talk about? It's like, I don't
Therapist
really.
choice.
So I was
Maybe like
like,
a spin the wheel.
yeah, I mean, sometimes it's like, I don't know. They tell us in training, like, oh, you just pick sex and money when they ask that. It's like, those are the hard ones. No one
Those are
wants
the
to talk
hard
about
ones.
that. But
That'll take a couple weeks to process through. Yeah.
in all seriousness, kind of hearing what's on your mind and where your mind flows, most of us do, especially those of us what's called sort of psychodynamic, thinking that you have an unconscious that's alive. Like with the journal, a good session goes from association to association. Like really good flow states that happen in therapy are about when we feel completely like uninhibited to just say the next thing that comes to mind. This is one of the things that Freud gifted us in a certain way. This notion that how our thoughts are connected, right? If you're telling me about your trauma, and then you're telling me about riding horses, and then you're telling me about pancakes at Waffle House in 1986, right? Those ideas are connected somehow. And so a journal offers us the same opportunity. So yeah, there are prompts for sure, and I offer up some prompts in the book, but I also am a big believer that the more relaxed you get in the journaling, the more you let whatever's bothering you come out onto the page, the more you see what you're writing about. Like I noticed I was writing over the last winter as I was finishing the book about a bunch of what I call like neurotic crap, just like, I don't know, my angst, my struggle. And I had this moment of just this like startle response, like in my body that I realized I wasn't like writing about the most important things. Like I hadn't written very much about like my wife, my kids, maybe even some of other things that were going on with me, and just started to like really try and shift some of what I was writing, some of what I was attending to in my journaling. So again, for me, that works. I don't want people to hear that, the book's all about journaling. I got teased. I was on like a horseback riding trip with a bunch of horse girls, and I kept like talking about journaling, and eventually I got teased a lot. But
Well, I would say, and I can't speak for everybody, but, in lots of conversations I've had with people over the years, people aren't necessarily putting pen to paper, journaling. And so,
I don't
maybe
think
that's,
so. It's like old school. It's like Dear
yeah, it's very
Diary
old
stuff,
school.
right?
Yeah.
And
I
then I
mean, I
think
have a
people worry
journal
that
that I
like,
do, but it's very structured questions. But I think when we really want to get to the root of, especially, call it midlife and, you're a lot of, like I said, a lot of things are up for review. All of a sudden you're wondering, well, what am I going to do with the rest of it? Am I really living my truth, or am I living my most authentic self? Am I doing what I love in my passion? What does it look like to step into the second half of my life? And I find that to get really clear, writing it down, having a prompt and like really working it through, I think gives us a lot of deep clarity about what we truly want. And so I'm a big proponent. My book has a ton of prompts in it, particularly for women who are stepping in. Maybe they're empty nesters and the world is their oyster, but it may not feel like that.
right.
And so, but what does it look like if that was true? Like, who do I get to step into? Who do I get to be? And so I am a huge proponent of journaling, but also I'm a big proponent of journaling about gratitude and the beautiful things, the
Oh
simple
yeah,
things.
lots of data on that too, right? Where the journal, it's a great point. It's not just free flow exploration. It's not just maybe processing or helping process our traumas or putting words to complex feelings. It's also a place for us to have gratitude. I noticed that also, again, that shift I was talking about. I noticed that there was more positivity, more things I wanted to be thankful for, more kind of acknowledgement. So, again, one of these 10 pieces of the tenet of self-awareness, again, journaling, along with, I'd say, talk therapy is two kind of tried and true ways of doing more self-awareness. I think, there are also other techniques I talk about in the book of looking at some of the patterns in your life and some of the habits that I see patients, particularly I talk a lot about the habit of what it's called disavowal. Disavowal, I see particularly in matriarchs, where I'll hear a long list of all the things someone knows about a situation, and then they'll end it looking me right in the eye and being like, I don't know. And it's a fascinating phenomenon. Everybody listen, you'll see it in yourself, most likely. We all do this. And I'm not sure why it happens, but I think it's something that's important to spot, because if you shift that to, I know a lot about this, it's a hard situation, my next step is, it's a much more powerful prompt and it's more true, right? And so it's a great place for us to be talking about kind of the self-awareness, especially, as your community is in a transition.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways a surprising transition, because we've often thought about development and female development is really, this is something in the teens, maybe in the 20s, and that's kind of it. And my experience of adulthood is really, that lets us down. The notion that there are clear developmental goals for me in my 40s, 50s, and 60s, which for sure there are. The idea that, the challenge of parenting, like what it evokes for us, I feel like I got almost no orientation about that. And so, there's so much for us in sort of having this notion of an ongoing development, right? And that this transition in the 40s, 50s, and 60s into the next phases, next chapters of life, being more intentional, having kind of being more clear maybe about the challenges in those for each of us. I think it helps us have a little more grace with them and again, feel more orient.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the intentionality and the extra grace for sure. And then again, it all just stems back to awareness, awareness of the transition, awareness of like, okay, these, everyone deserves a heads up, of
Mm-hmm.
what's to come, and just like, okay, I'm going to weather this, with these tools. I
Mm-hmm.
think I've really had to tool up in this particular phase. And probably there was a lot of years where there was deep disassociation. I could easily, just shove things back, and focus on the forward, and now it's all kind of like, oh no, it's time. You get to address this, as all these things are shifting. So it's been interesting. and for me, in my own, personal experience as a mom and someone who's holding a lot of plates in the air and holding space for a lot of people, I find that if I can be aware of my ability to be regulated or notice when I deregulate, I just, my stress response, things just all of a sudden, I'm a little bit more reactive, that gosh, I'm more kinder to myself. I'm able to manage and weather the moments better. And I think what I know there's no perfect way to do any of this, obviously, but I think there's a standard in which I'd like to show up for people around me. And the awareness piece is the biggest win for me to ensure that I do that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And
Well,
so
I really appreciate that. I mean, it was a late edit, not a late, but it was this moment in the book where it was like, like self-awareness is like late. And it's like, no, this has to be the beginning tenet. Like
mm,
that, like you probably don't buy Healing the Modern Brain unless you have a sense of self-awareness a little bit to begin with, that you want to improve your mental health in the modern world is doing things to it. So I really appreciate the idea appeals to you, and it's part of, as you're saying, the work that you've done, right? That what do you say, tooled up, right? That it's like, hey, I got to build some more tools here, and I think for all of us, as you build more tools, you get into different things. I exercise and move my body much differently now than I did 10 years ago. Things shift, things change. It kind of leads you into places you maybe didn't expect. So
well, I think, yeah, I think what I love so much about the idea of your book, and I haven't fully read it yet, was the window of opportunity is what I
mm,
love. Yes, there's a lot of things that are coming at us. There's a lot of things that are happening to us. The way that life is structured. I always say that there's nothing about this modern day life that is conducive to, happy or optimized hormones. Like the body's just like, I'm just doing the best I can with what I got in this situation. And so the idea that there are tools that we can, let and being intentional around it that can really support not only our emotional and mental well-being, but also our families, that is so deeply appealing to me because that's very hopeful to
mm.
me.
I mean, it's always my intention with my work in mental health to give people hope, to show people some of the good evidence, and to share some of my experience as a clinician. I've been working with patients in mental health settings, gosh, exclusively for the last, 22 years. So I've really been privileged and blessed to see a lot of different stories of individuals and families, often meeting them at very challenging times, and seeing the narrative of what happens as they get better. And so the tenets really stem from this clinical experience, backed up by, I think, some common sense and then a lot of evidence. And then again, these lenses, we haven't talked about some of them, but this notion of what happens if we think about neuroplasticity, the idea your brain grows and repairs itself, as a major way we want to think about mental health, right? Not just like serotonin and dopamine and all that stuff. I mean, those are all very cool. I love all those,
I
but
love neurotransmitters. Yeah,
right, the yay
sure.
neurotransmitters, estradiol, as you said, master, like hormone, like really important. So these are all players in the space, but what we're really after is brain growth and brain repair. How do we keep that going? Right? How does that influence what we eat? How does that influence how we sleep? And then weird stuff like how that should influence how we socialize. Because one of the major kind of drivers of brain and brain growth can be social interaction compared to social isolation, which we know is horrible for the brain
Yeah.
and leads the brain to shrink. And so neuroplasticity, and then again, this notion of inflammation, right? Everybody
Hmm.
listening has been hearing about that, but we often don't think about it as applied to our brain.
Oh, I think it deeply applies to the brain. I mean,
Deeply applies.
deeply. I mean, I think that's a lot of the root of our mental health issues, especially as we get older, but based on, again, ultra processed food, sedentary lifestyle, loneliness. I mean, we're so deeply wired for connection,
Mm-hmm.
and declining hormones. I mean, that drives inflammation in the brain too. But yeah, I mean, what level is that playing out in terms of our mental health resilience?
It's going to vary person to person. I mean, there have been studies showing that, for example, people who have depression that doesn't respond to kind of typical treatments, about a third of those have elevated inflammatory markers. I think it plays out in a micro way that when we're sick, when we go out on a bender and drink too much, actually, there was a study that came out that showed this direct correlation between how hungover you are and the level of inflammation in your brain.
Oh yeah,
And
I'm
just as
sure.
a way that you can kind of feel it, like what does bad inflammation feel like?
Yeah,
Think
that's
about
what
your
it
worst
feels like.
hangover. It's like
Yeah.
that's what it feels like. There are, I think, a lot of opportunities. Like, how prevalent is it? It's like, well, for some people who are living a sedentary lifestyle, who struggled with weight gain, maybe are in a period post-pandemic where they're a little more socially isolated or dealing with a lot of stressors, it's probably playing out today. And I think, the hope of healing the modern brain, and really the hope of my work, is that we all, me too, all get more active in caring for our mental fitness and building it every day as a way really to protect our mental health.
Mhm.
And so, I don't know what my inflammatory levels are. I slept pretty well last night. I've been eating pretty healthy, but I've been sitting here all day seeing patients, doing interviews. We all know if I go hike up a mountain, spend some time cuddling with my dog, have a healthy dinner, get in my sauna,
Yeah.
my inflammatory markers are probably going to be better tonight, and I'm going to sleep better, so they're going to be better tomorrow. And then if I can keep that up for a while, again, I'm living a lifestyle that's really both according to my values, but I'm also doing great things to protect my brain health.
Well, and I guess that's what I'm thinking a lot when I kind of was prepping for this was how do, one of the things I always tell my ladies is to know your numbers. One, just we should know our baseline numbers. I know what my highly sensitive C-reactive protein number is. I just ran it a week
Hmm.
ago. I also know what my fasting insulin, so I know these numbers and mind you, I also know what it feels like to feel alive and to feel energized. And my body does amazing in nature. I can feel the difference when I am not in nature. I think that's one of the reasons why I was struggling that day with my beautiful sick son was that I needed to be outside. My body was like, "What are you doing inside on a couch? Like we move, we go to the beach." And so it was this. I was this where my body was like, "This is what we do," and I was like, "Yeah, but Mama's playing the mama role today, like big time." And so kind of working through that discrepancy. But I think about particularly with my brain, like I know what it feels like when my brain is well rested, when it feels alive, when it's firing all cylinders. That's a brain with no alcohol in it ever. That's a brain with balanced blood sugar. That's a brain that's been outside 2 to 3 times that day. That's a brain that got great sleep and it's eating a protein rich fiber rich diet, like, and who gets lots of cuddles. Like I think those are the little things when I was thinking about intentionality of like, oh, and that's a brain who spent 20 minutes in the sauna last night, reading a great
Hmm.
book. And so those are the things I was thinking lifestyle wise that we can do. And then there's the deeper awareness and the recognizing triggers, which is kind of the deeper work. But I think of a layer of like, one, we have the everyday things that we do that help us to feel most alive, not only in our body, but in our brain. And then we get to go and do the deeper work too, to kind of really uncover some of the other things that, are coming
Yeah, and
up.
I think you're bringing a good point that a lot of times I think people want to approach like wait and then dive into the deep end of the pool. And I like
Mm.
what you're describing, which is really, you're someone who has a good sense of mental fitness and a good mental fitness routine. And we probably did note that part of what happened with when your son was sick wasn't just that you weren't productive. It's also that in that context of sitting there with him on the couch, you're not engaging in some of those self-care activities that are at the core of your mental fitness plan. And so
Yes.
that dysregulation you then begin to feel is like, wow, the stuff that you usually use is not there. Plus, there's a notion you're not being productive. And so it
I
just,
think even I felt, even in my body felt like, we're out of calibration. There
yeah,
was that. Like we do things to like keep in calibration. And girl, you're stuck on the
yes,
couch all day. Like I think I clocked,
yeah,
maybe I still clocked 10,000 steps, but I had to work my butt off to
right,
get those 10,000
right.
steps.
It wasn't just part of the day. Well, look, I hope everybody listening hears
Yeah.
um, my encouragement and that healing the modern brain is really here not to overwhelm that, again, every day you've got to do these 9 things, but that every day with some intention, you end up doing these 9 tenets. We all agree they're good for the mental health. I share a lot of the science of how some of these things, whether it's the right foods or shifting a little bit how you think about sleep, how all of this really can help take care of our brains and improve our mental health by, and again, having a construct, a mental fitness construct. It's awesome to talk with you and just to connect with a audience of women. Just one of the delights I think of being a psychiatrist is you have this job that's unlike most jobs where it's really like you have to listen in a way and not mansplain and really kind of hear around a woman's perspective. I don't know, differently and in some ways like better than other people as their therapist and their psychiatrist. And it's just been one of the I don't know, biggest delights of my career for sure. Thank you so much for an opportunity to talk about the book. I've got a patient in the
Yeah, you got a
waiting room,
patient.
so
Yeah.
I've got to go be a doctor and be a psychiatrist. But what a treat! Thank you so much for everything you shared about your mental fitness and this interplay we talked about around mental fitness and trauma and kind of regulation and tools. I just really appreciate the conversation. It's great to connect with you.
Yeah, it was so great. Thank you so much for coming on. And I'm sending you so much love around this beautiful book and how it's going to change many lives.
I hope so. Everybody, please check it out. There's also an e-course. Everything's up on my site, drewramseymd.com. And then I'm on Instagram at drewramseymd. And so I look forward to connecting with you all. And thanks so much for highlighting healing the modern brain. I really appreciate it. Everybody have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.